Drew, you work with different types of athletes, and I'm so curious to know what is the difference in a training session or even a training program between someone who races, let's say, snowcross, which I know you work with some pro athletes there, but then also
Mhm.
you've got supercross. So elite athletes, top of their game, would love to hear the difference in training between the two.
Yeah, the biggest difference that I've found is the time. So snowcross, your longest race is going to be around 12 minutes. Where obviously with moto and supercross, you're looking at like the 16, 20-minute, and then 35-minute mark. So with snowcross, we're working with a heavier machine. So we're doing a little bit more strength training and plyos, but we're training for a shorter duration. Where with moto, we're working a little bit more endurance just because you have that longer race.
Gotcha. And by the way, guys, we're here with Drew Whitehead, who is a fitness trainer but it's called Momentum Tally, right? And
Yep.
that is in Tallahassee, Florida, correct?
That is correct. I'm down here in Tallahassee in the new Moto Mecca.
The new Moto Mecca, yeah. And what Drew's referring to, for those of you that may not know, is I don't know, maybe what, 15 minutes from downtown Tallahassee or so
Yep.
thereabouts. They're a legend. If you're not aware of motocross, supercross, a legend, Ricky Carmichael, had what was called the goat farm because there were actually goats there. I don't know if they're there now, but
Yeah.
they were quite
They'll eat
cute and
your
cool.
lunch.
And so when Ricky retired, his mom actually continued for years to put on classes and actually had athletes like one of your athletes, Kevin Moranz was there, Seth Hamaker, and a couple other athletes would go through and get training from Jeannie Carmichael, who was Ricky Carmichael, the GOAT, his mom.
Yep.
And then Star Yamaha came in and recently bought the property and is now really ramped up their program now that they have their own facility, their own track, and it's only 15 minutes from you. So what's interesting is, have you been able to tap into that resource of having your facility so close to Star Yamaha, or is it kind of hard to get into that program just because they've already got a personal trainer that works with their group of guys?
No, it hasn't because I have a great relationship with Jeannie Carmichael through the years when I was working on their fitness and she was there on the track with them. So right when Star came in, Jeannie's also helping them. And Gareth Swanepoel, so Swanee, reached out to me immediately and said, "Hey, we need a gym to go to when we're off the bike." And most of the guys live down here in Tallahassee. So they actually train at my facility every week. So it's been awesome to have the Star crew as a part of our program here along with the athletes that I work with.
Oh, nice. So just curious, you've got the different athletes that all have come from a different background and they've all now come to one facility with Star Yamaha. Do you find that even though Swanee might be involved in managing some of their programs, do you find that they're all starting to merge into one very similar program? Or do you find that each and every one of them kind of has their own unique style and likes to bring their own kind of personality, if you will, to their workouts and their
Yeah.
training?
The way that I see it is they are on a program that's as a team and they work together very well like that. But in this sport of moto, we're working around injuries all the time. So also depending on the injury, depending on if they're racing East Coast or West Coast, depending on if they're racing next weekend or have 2 weeks till they race again, it is an individualized team program. And here at Momentum, we also have Real Recovery. So I have a doctor of physical therapy. So it's been good to have the guys work with our physical therapists as well on injuries and things like that.
Yeah, and especially motocross, supercross. It's not a matter of if, it's definitely a matter of when. So, in addition to the recovery side that you guys have, and now you have actually a doctor on site that can
Hmm.
help with that process. How do you manage? I just dealt with from tennis an MCL injury, and then a couple days later, I threw out my back really bad. Actually, it was probably the worst I've ever done it. So I was basically useless for a little bit. But then I also was at a very good point in my program where I was like, wow, I'm getting fit. I'm getting there. Like I'm in a good place. And
Hmm.
then it was just like, stop.
Yeah,
How do
that's tough.
you manage the training of someone? Because, obviously, if there's other parts that can move and be worked, I mean, are we just shifting our focus and momentum to another body part or another area? Like, let's say, for example, it's a knee injury. Are you just moving to upper body only, or what does that look
Yeah,
like for
it is
training?
100% a shift. Very rarely are you going to be not training through an injury in the sport of snowcross, motocross, supercross. So most of the time, we're just making the shift to working what we can while we can and where we can. So, if we're working with an ACL injury, we're with a physical therapist to rehab the ACL, doing corrective exercise and rehab exercise. But on the upper body, it's go time, and we're working on upper body strength, endurance. And you're going to see a lot of moto athletes using equipment, maybe not exactly how it's meant to be, but because that's how we can use it. So, for example, instead of doing cardio on a bike, you're going to be sitting on a chair on a ski machine using that upper body for cardio.
Oh, interesting. I like
Mm-hmm.
that. Yeah, and so with the guys that you've been working with recently, I believe that how you do anything is how you do everything. And so one thing that I test, and also as a mental performance coach, it's also something I dip into a little bit with my athletes when they hit the gym, is really being focused, being present. I sometimes will even test myself going into a version of like warrior mode before I even go into the gym. Once I get out of the car and I close the door and I walk to the gym, I walk as if I'm walking into battle, just to
Mm-hmm.
test drive it and kind of play with the level of intensity that I have during my workout. And it works like gold. I'm curious to see with you. I just feel like it's easy for people, and I've heard people do this before. I've even caught my own athletes doing it, where it's like, oh, I just want to get my workout in, which that phrase drives me insane. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you're just trying to get a workout in, just stay home, have some popcorn, maybe do a TV dinner if they still exist anymore. If not, maybe you can have someone deliver one. But why are you even here? Like, you have to, how you do anything is how you do everything. So my question to you is, how do you get the most out of a workout? Not just
Mm-hmm.
the workout itself, but maybe give me a little bit of like, how can you frame it? And what do you do to guide your athletes to maybe get 2 to 3% more out of a workout than they would if they just went into check the box?
Yeah. One is it needs to be measurable, which is a huge part of a program that most people don't have. Is they know what they're going to do, they have a workout, but they don't measure it. So you don't know what you did last time versus what you're doing this time. So having a measurable workout that you can do that you repeat over and over, or knowing what your heart rates are, your heart rate zones. There's many ways we can measure a workout, but having intention for the workout to make that progress over the last one is, for me, the biggest part as a coach. Is if I'm with them in person, I know that they're making progress. Or even if they're online and they're in a different state, like my snowcross guy Nick, he's up in Wisconsin. We have stats that we measure. I log in after every workout, check his data, and know if he's giving it that percentage that he needs to, or if he didn't. And if he didn't, it's all on paper and we know it. And if he did, it normally shows up on the track because you can see the progress that he made.
Oh wow. So what kind of data are we talking about here? I'm super curious to see like what is the measurement? Because on the mental game, other than results, it's tough. I mean, I've dipped into what you said. I've had like
Uh-huh.
an intention to execution type ratio to see, hey, we're gonna, this is our intention during qualifying one. Did we execute, yes or no? And if we did, what are we giving ourselves for a number? And if there's 7s and 8s, we're not happy. 9s and
Uh-huh.
10s is what we're looking for.
Yeah. From a cardiovascular standpoint, we do testing to test lactate threshold, VO2 max, heart rate max, recovery heart rates. All of that's going to give us a certain amount of workload that they need during the workout. And we can measure that. So afterwards, we know if they held the right amount of watts for the right amount of time or if they didn't. So it's a functional power threshold that we can see every single time they train. Now, if we're in more of a strength workout, or off season where we're working on really getting stronger, then obviously we have weight and reps that we can track. So depending on the workout and the time of the season, we will track different things, but we always have something that we're tracking to know if that workout was worth doing or if you were just getting it done.
I love it. Busted. um, so when you brought up the strength part, and it's interesting on my end because obviously, especially with a sled, I mean, you really got to have some upper body strength, some leg strength. Same thing with
Hmm.
moto. You've got this 230-pound or
Yeah.
device below you, and it's even higher, obviously, with a sled. So
Yeah. They're
strength is a big
450
thing.
pounds.
What's that?
450 pounds. Yeah. That's what about 450 pounds for a race snowmobile.
Oh, geez. So when it comes to like finding a balance between strength and then more of like a cardiovascular conditioning, how do you manage that piece of the puzzle?
Yeah, I manage it based off of the athletes' testing numbers. So we find that some athletes come in with a really good cardiovascular base and good cardio numbers, but then on a strength side aren't showing it. Where other athletes come in, like maybe someone who played football his whole life and transferred into racing, they normally have a really good strength balance, but then you get them into their threshold testing and their cardio testing, and it's not there. So I will utilize the athlete's results that they present to me on day one through our testing and then design the program from there. Also, every time they ride, every time they race, we're seeing data and we're asking how they're feeling. So we can also go off of feel, but feeling isn't always everything when you have all the emotions involved, which I think is a lot where you come in. So we look at measurable data along with, verbal feedback.
I love it. Yeah, and it's interesting because I've got a pro golfer, and the big topic is feel versus real. And
Mhm.
how much of, and I think that might even be something with Roxon. Whenever I hear an athlete is chasing settings, especially we see this all the time, all too often, and I've actually bumped into it in golf as well, chasing a new club, chasing a different shaft, a new club face. But then you start to realize that, well, are we chasing a setting? Because a lot of times these guys will start with their baseline setting. You hear it all the time. I mean, I've been in this
Mhm.
field for years, and it's like they start with a baseline setting, chase, 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 and then oftentimes they come right back to where they were. And
Yeah.
so the feel versus real concept is very real. It's
Yeah.
pretty wild how that works.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, it's something we see like every preseason, going into the season, guys are chasing settings. And I'm going through it with a couple of my athletes right now where the race feeling isn't always there for them, but it's really easy to go down the wrong rabbit hole.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And like you say, it really is a rabbit hole because especially, in the type of sports that we're in with these motorsports where you've got, 8, 10, 12 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is, that's it. Once you go in, you bring what you got and you bring your best, but
Mhm.
it's very difficult to adjust in real time and be adaptable within that moto. So you better hope you go on with the right vibe and you have the right strategy and plan and you execute on it, because if you go down the wrong rabbit hole, especially you see it with tracks that evolve throughout the evening,
Yep.
and you get these athletes that get comfortable on a setting in, let's say, not so much free practice, but maybe first qualifier, but then by the evening, not only is there moisture that's set in, so sometimes tracks will have a little bit more moisture, be a little more slick, but even just the characteristics of the track, the lines have changed where
Yep.
you almost have to predict what the suspension should be, and
Yeah.
maybe ride through it at the beginning.
Yeah, and that's where you see teams and riders that have data from years prior can really predict ahead of time, and riders who don't have that data or don't have a good team around them struggle a little bit more because they just don't know what direction to go.
Yeah, and you bring up data, which I think, when it comes to auto racing, data is huge. LitPro came out, which I felt was an amazing tool.
Mhm.
But I really struggled to get my athletes to adopt it. It seems like there's a lack, in my opinion, there's a lack of data when it comes specifically to motocross and supercross when compared. I'm not saying there isn't data, but when you compare it to golf, I mean, we have TrackMan, we have all these tools. The numbers are insane as far as what you can
Mhm.
track. And obviously, with auto racing, you see any athlete that gets out of the car, they're eventually going to be sitting in front of a computer at some point, looking at their data from their last session. Do you feel that there could be a better use of data, not so much just on the physical side, because I know that you've gotten involved in this kind of like I have, where you start to
Mhm.
dance in many areas, not just the physical and the fitness side. But do you think that there's room for maybe more data use, or do you feel like we don't need any more?
I think that right now you can see the separation from a factory program and a privateer program where someone's not who's not on a team, because that factory team is breaking down data every single time that they're out on the track, whether it be filming and overlaying a faster rider versus you, looking at your data from your engine and how it was performing, looking back at video of your suspension and your line choice, looking at the track map versus the line that you took. All of that, if you get involved with a high level team, they're on it. And you go into the privateer pits, and in between, they're sitting there eating a peanut butter and jelly. So I think there's a major difference. And I think the people who would benefit the most are the riders who are a little bit more in the back and just need to take that extra little dial and turn it up to gather more data, get more data on what they're doing. But, you know, is it harder? Yeah, it's harder because you need more people. So you got to have someone to film you and help you review it. So I see why it's not always there, but I think it would make huge gains for so many riders.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's night and day. I mean, even something as simple as Dartfish, which do any of your athletes use the Dartfish program?
Dartfish is blowing up right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had it back. I was on a team, the Blue Buffalo team. We had the technology's been around, but it kind of like fell out of favor, I think, for a little bit with like maybe the guys outside of maybe top 10. But everyone that I know that uses it, I mean, they sometimes will live on it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't beat the fact that you can like ghost a rider and you can look at the differences. I mean, it's like clear as day. And then if you take data and then you have the visual, then you start to close the gap between feel and real. It's like, that's a fact. You're not, your body position is off or your line choice is off. It's interesting.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting that we see that difference. And I do agree with you that there needs to be more bodies, but from my experience, you tell someone, hey, do you want to help me out and be part of the team?
Yeah.
Most people are excited at that. So I wonder, do you think that's more of an excuse than not?
I think that it's very easy to overcome, especially at the level of being a pro athlete. And one of my racers that I've worked with since he was 14, Kevin Moran's, is an awesome example of that. He reaches out and gets help every weekend from the people that maybe are in that town where the race is going. And people are so pumped to help him, so pumped that they'll pay him $100 to sign their name on his bike, right? Like, people want to help you. And those same people, if you can take that and apply it to your race day, I think that that's one of the reasons why we've seen Kevin be a main event guy this year, is that he is utilizing more resources than he ever has and utilizing his platform to help him not only grow financially, but also grow his results and his name in the industry.
Oh, for sure. And, it's actually perfect time to move into this conversation because I've been really fascinated by, we have an athlete in common that we work together with. And then, just looking at your athletes from a motorsport standpoint, I see Josh Cartwright, who I've been a fan of for years, Kevin Moran's, who I met at the goat farm, actually, when I was there with another athlete. So that was the first interaction I had with him. And then you've got Nick Lorenz, and then you got Josh Shepard in snowcross. What I find very fascinating to me is these are all really great human beings, not just great athletes, not just great, at their sport and their discipline, but you seem to gravitate towards these really great human beings. Is this by design or is this by chance? Tell me more about that.
My motorsports program is only by referral. So these are people that have been, brought my way, referred to me, pushed my way somehow over the years. And I have a very high retention, low volume program. So I don't work with a lot of people, and I tend to work with people for a long time, which I believe is a main part of getting results, is consistency. So I've never thought about it like you just explained it, but karma, I don't know. How are they getting to me? It's working. So all these guys I've worked with for years. And obviously people do come and go, but my goal is to really help people on the bike, off the bike, in their life, and develop a relationship to be there for them, because so much of this racing game is highs and lows. And I want to be there, someone, who they can rely on.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and it's interesting because what's most fascinating is your one athlete, Josh Cartwright, has a 9 to 5, has a cubicle. The cubicle actually got some TV time recently, I believe, so that was pretty cool. We need to get him some artwork for that cubicle. But Josh Cartwright impresses me because, especially this season, the fact that he's able to maintain a 9 to 5 and still compete at an extremely high level. What I'm interested to know is you've got two athletes that are at a very similar pace and result. You've got Kevin Moranz and you've got Joshua Cartwright. One has the 9 to 5 job that is completely different than his racing. And the other, I believe, is full-time all in on racing. How do you manage the difference between those two? Because they're so similar in speed and talent and ability, but yet their day-to-day is so different.
Yeah, they're like exciting me and stressing me out every weekend racing each other. So I love it, but I'm also like, come on, guys, like we can still be friends. Josh's schedule is he still rides the same amount during the week as Kevin. He just has his computer at the track. So he rides and then hops on his computer, and he rides and hops on his computer. So we really haven't sacrificed his overall volume of training or riding, but he does sacrifice what he does in between sessions. And Kevin, even though he doesn't have a 9 to 5, if you dive in more about how Kevin Moranz runs his life, he is always on the go with his business, and he has completely transformed his off the bike progress over the last couple of years with his YouTube and his Patreon and his sponsorship packages. And that guy, when he gets done racing, he will be a #1 salesman wherever he goes. So Kevin, even though he is full-time moto, he's the same as Josh, honestly. When they're not on the track, they're on their computer doing work.
Yeah, and it's such an important piece that I have always been maybe hypersensitive to. Is I've seen it time and time again where you get these athletes, I'm sure you've seen it too. You get these athletes, these fast guys, fast up and comers. They've got the speed, they've got the talent, and then they kind of get to this point where the limiting factor is more so finance than it is talent. And it's interesting to me that I feel like the way that people market themselves, Kevin Moranz is definitely not an example of what I'm about to say, but they don't market themselves as well. They don't have all the channels and the ways of marketing themselves. Like, let's say even like an AJ Catanzaro, he's got the Moto Academy, he's got an app, he's got partnerships, he's considered an influencer. So when, a brand like Fox, or I know FXR is big on influencer types, they like to go to the guys that are the trainers and say, hey, listen, your word has so much value. We'd love to support you. And, I've talked to Andy at FXR, and he'd rather take a guy who's maybe a 20th place guy, or maybe not even, but has the influence over, let's say 40, 50, 100, 1,000 people. He'd rather sponsor that guy than the guy who's in 13th place, who's got 8,700 followers, which, maybe a little bit more than that, but maybe isn't as active on social, or maybe if he does anything on social, it's just tagging someone in a video of him riding in their equipment. Do you have a sense for why is it that, to me, if you agree, there is this gap in marketing? You see Kevin Moranz who's crushing it, you see AJ Catanzaro who's crushing it, but then there's this gap and it's huge. Why do you think that is?
Because it's uncomfortable, because you got to be vulnerable, because you got to put yourself out there, because you got to make a couple of steps that you wouldn't make unless you force yourself to for a couple times. And I think that's the difference. It's time and comfortability. And just like you have to push yourself into that uncomfortable zone to increase your speed, you're going to have to do the same thing if you want to get out and market yourself. So some guys don't mind if they look stupid for a couple videos, where other people, their ego maybe is a little bit too big that they're not willing to put themselves out there to actually get it off the ground and get going.
Oh yeah, the first time that you do a video, I mean, even right now, I have to look at a camera where your face is actually here. So
Yep.
I'm tempted to look here, but instead I'm literally for an hour and a half, hour, whatever, however long we go, I'm literally looking straight ahead at nothing basically. And it's funny because you just get comfortable with it. And
Yep.
the first time you do a video, it's just like a reshoot, a reshoot, a reshoot. And then you listen to it and you just shame yourself. And then it's no
Yep.
wonder why nobody continues after that. You delete, delete, delete.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's the main difference is it's time, and these guys are bred to race. They haven't been trained in PR and marketing and video production, editing and all these things. So unless they branch out and get into it on their own, or they get to the highest level where the team brings in the marketing coordinator for them, it's just something that they miss.
oh, for sure. Yeah. And it's, you start to realize, even myself, right now, I'm on a big push of getting very familiar with Google ads, YouTube ads.
Hmm.
And that for me is where the scalability is. I mean, you can only post so much on social. And I've already had 2 Instagram accounts shut down. One got to 68,000 followers, shadow banned by Instagram and the Zuck. And then
Yep.
another one at like 10, 11,000, whatever it was, banned for posting a video of a stoppie. And so even with myself, I'm like, wait a minute, you know, uh, the email marketing, I want to get people right into my email or my contact list so that heaven forbid something dramatic like this happens again, which I
Hmm.
think I've safeguarded myself quite well on this. Matter of fact, I've moved more towards like Twitter and YouTube, LinkedIn. But it's interesting because even an email list, I remember when I spent a lot more time with AJ Catanzaro, I'm like, man, you got to start getting emails. You got to have your own private community and you have to have emails. And it's funny, I sent him a document that we had from 2017 where we talked about his goals for the next
Uh-huh.
year, and everything that he's done now was all in that list. And
That's
so it's
awesome.
really cool.
Yeah, I like to call that predictable success.
I love it. Speaking of predictable success, right before we hopped on this, I got almost like stage fright from the fact that one of my online idols, this Jack dude who just blew up recently, who is brilliant, really into marketing, has an amazing book, $100 million offers, I believe it is, or 100,
Yep.
yeah. And if you guys, even though this is a little off topic, if you guys want to know what an offer is and how to make a very powerful offer, this is the best time spent for you is to read this book by Alex Hermosi. And if you want, hit us up and we'll share it with you. You're actually working with Alex, which part of me is surprised, but then the other part of me is like, Drew's doing what Drew does, and this is the kind of thing Drew does. So no
Yeah.
surprise there. Walk me through a little bit of what this relationship was. First of all, I'd love to hear how it got started, and that love to know as you've grown your business and it's become so successful, what have been the keys to your success throughout that process?
Yeah, so obviously I work with a small select amount of motorsports athletes, about 5 or 6 per year. I also here in Tallahassee own a gym called Momentum Tally, which you see behind me there on the sign, and we've got about 3,500 members, and we have 1,000 people in a training program. So we have strength conditioning program, personal trainers, yoga, Pilates, stuff like that. And I've been really looking at how do I get outside of the walls that I'm in here at Momentum, because from a scalability factor, the brick and mortar business, you can only fit so many people inside your walls. And also, how can I make better offers to get people better results, to get a better return on my investment? And I actually first came across the book, $100 million offers. I listen to audiobooks every day from my house to the time I get to work. So 15 minutes every day there and back. So 30 minutes a day, I'm on an audiobook instead of listening to music. And I listened to this book and it completely changed the way that I was thinking about my business, a year ago, 2 years ago versus now. So I decided to get involved with Gym Launch, which is Alex's gym business. And it's been something that's very eye-opening, and they have really helped me create a platform to get outside of Tallahassee and also maximize the walls that I have here in Tallahassee. So it's been awesome. And that offer, how we can relate it back to moto would be, you have to offer sponsors something to sponsor you for and offer them to pay for it. And a lot of times, things that we're afraid to do when it comes to selling things, which is kind of a scary word, is ask for money. So when you can put down an awesome offer and the value is there for the person in front of you, they're more than happy to pay it. So for me, it's all about learning how to build value and how to get outside of the walls that I have here in Tallahassee while still maintaining an awesome business and brick and mortar gym here in Tallahassee.
Oh, wow. So are you looking to create a brand? I mean, are we doing like a momentum Tally than a momentum Miami? Is that kind of the direction you're thinking?
Momentum Tampa, momentum Chicago. Yeah, like one thing is to expand into more facilities, which I would like to get, my operating procedures and everything a little more squared up before we go that route. But then another thing is to, like you were talking about, get into that online space of YouTube and Facebook and Google and Twitter and Instagram and start offering something to people that's going to give them value, even if they can't come to Tallahassee.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, and one thing that you can do, and I'll do a selfless plug right now. Behindthebest.co is our website, my website, and we have something called the Beast Bulletin. The Beast Bulletin has a free version where you can get, emails about little tips, access to reminders about podcasts that we've done, such as this one. But we have the Beast Premium, where every single Monday for only $33 a month, I send out an email with a Monday through Friday game plan that is focused solely on the mental game. It's for pro athletes, student athletes, parents, and coaches. And so far, we've actually gotten really good feedback. We just started this month, and we've already got several paid members, and we just keep growing. We've got 2 paid partnerships that we're doing. So
Awesome.
with that said, you should consider, and I can, we could talk more about it off this call, but the newsletter, I'll tell you, to me, because I struggle with scalability as well, because I work one-on-one with clients, but I can only handle so many. And, I can never really take a day off, because if I've got one athlete who's, competing in Argentina at a PGA event, and then I've got another one who's competing here. Sometimes I don't know if you've done this yet. My guess is you have. Sometimes I'll have one TV on upstairs and one downstairs, and I get my cardio in just going between the two. I could probably do it on my phone, but I try to be dramatic with it. I kind of get excited to go up and down a little bit, but so that's something to consider as well.
For sure.
One thing that I think is interesting is what do you see? There's something inside of all these athletes. There's something inside of Nick and Josh, the Joshes, and also with Kevin. What is it that you've noticed now that you've worked with these elite athletes? What do you think would maybe be like maybe the top 1 or maybe top 3 traits and characteristics that you see that is similar or maybe even unique in each one of them? But what seems to be the difference between the good and the great?
A couple of things I noticed. One is the ability to get your ass kicked and keep going. You're going to have bad days, and what matters is what you do with that bad day. And some people get to the breaking point where they didn't get where they wanted to be, so they just stop. These guys don't stop. They keep digging. They dig into the mental coach. They look at their nutrition. They look at their program. They look at their bike. They're looking and leaving no stones unturned to make progress. And it didn't happen in one day. They've been doing it for years. And that's what got them to this point. So one is the consistency of putting in the effort, whether they were having a good day or a bad day. And even on those bad days, I'm not saying they don't complain. They may call me and say, I hated that. That was horrible. What am I doing? But they wake up the next day and they're back at it again. That is the number one thing. And then the second thing is that as time goes on, they work on getting a crew around them who helps push them towards their success. None of these guys are doing it alone, from a factory level all the way down to a privateer who's doing their rookie race for the first time. So if you can grow your crew to people to support you and help you and delegate off items that you don't need to focus on and keep flipping those rocks over for the problems you have, I think that is a main difference that I see. not just talent, right? Talent's one of it, but where they say like talent, what's the saying? Come on, you
Oh,
got me here.
yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, talent.
Hard work
Oh,
beats talent when talent doesn't work hard.
that's it.
So,
Yeah, that's a hard one to remember, by the way. You got to be talented just to remember that one.
well, I stumbled, but I got it.
Yeah, and it's funny because that's the name of the game is you stumble, but it's like how resilient are you? And these athletes, I mean, let's say you and I, let's say today you find out that one of your pipes in your facility breaks, and there's a leak, and you arrive, and oh geez, it's a mess. You got to pay this, you got to get this guy in. You've got hours to process it, let it go, move forward. But with these athletes, you have to let go. You have to have the memory of like a gnat. Like
Yeah.
you have to just let it go. Let it go. Someone T-bones you, let it go. Let it go. You come up short on a triple, let it go, let it go. And so it's interesting that that resilience is huge. And that's actually a big part of what I do is trying to break the emotional attachment people have to failure and identifying with it as opposed to like experiencing it. And it's amazing. But I agree with you. The letting go and the resilience and the people that you keep around you is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And, and it's funny because that's probably a part of your success too, is it seems like the people that you've surrounded yourself with are A-game players, and A-game players know more A-game players, and it just spreads out. I mean, it's interesting to think about that.
Yeah. In my business, it doesn't happen with just me here at the gym. So it's a whole team of people that I put my time into and coaching and developing and having a relationship with them so they can all go spread their wings and fly and help this business flourish.
Now, for your business to be doing the volume it's doing and to be as successful it is, there needs to be some degree of, I'm not a big fan of the word manager. I don't really understand that word or feel it's that valuable. I feel like leadership is more
Yep.
so the term. Um, how do you lead your team? Because the more that, and you see this with coaches, and I've noticed this with myself. One of the athletes that I work with last season, when we did our end of season debrief, and he almost won the championship, one of the biggest things that we came to the conclusion was that he needs to become one opportunity is to become a better leader. So the whole off season, I'd say more than half of our time was spent on leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to see this time and time again. Even with myself, I start to bump into people that are like, hey, any leadership tips? And then I just talked to a principal of a school who's a basketball coach the other day, and he's got a couple books on leadership. How do you lead? What's your formula for that?
I like to lead from the front. So, I've been in this industry for 20 years. I've been in the trenches. I know what it takes from the bottom to the top. So for me, I like to find out what is the reason why someone's here? What's the reason why they're working? What are their future goals? And I help them bridge the gap of finding their sweet spot of what they're good at while they're here and where they're trying to get to, have them tell me what it is they want to achieve. And then I help make a plan within these walls of how we can get there. And then main thing is hold them accountable and tell them what they're doing good. And also tell them the hard words that maybe they're not doing good and help them develop on their weaknesses. So I like to lead by standing in front of them, having face-to-face conversation or FaceTime, whatever it may be, and being there for them. It's the same that I do with my athletes is we find out where they're at. We find out where they want to get to. We bridge that gap by making a plan, make changes along the way if needed, and hold them accountable to doing what it takes to get to where they want to be.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Yeah, and the accountability piece is huge. I agree with you on that. It's so easy to kind of create these habits that can go overlooked or dismissed, and before you know it, they turn into something even bigger. So to have that accountability, and I think also, the people that are working with you are probably looking up to you. They're like, wow, Josh has got a beautiful wife. He's now got a child. He's photogenic. I saw your Breckenridge photos. I'm like, oh, wow. I'm like, did he really get married or is he a part-time model? Those
Right?
came out great. so I think people look up to you because you're leading by example, essentially. I
Mhm.
mean, people see you working with athletes, getting success with, having great results with them, growing your business. It's like, how could they not look up to you and look for you to lead? So
Well, I appreciate that.
yeah, that's really cool. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk more about two topics that you can't get away from when it comes to any sport, but more specifically with motocross and supercross. Talk to me a little bit about how you manage race day nutrition and even the night before, because I feel like every athlete I've worked with, and I try not to go into the nutrition piece because it's just definitely not my wheelhouse and
Yep.
definitely not the physical fitness side. I definitely stick to the mental, but it's interesting because I don't think there's ever been an athlete that I've worked with yet that didn't have an opportunity to refine their nutrition piece just as much as they can improve their fitness. Because it seems like the order is, people focus on their fitness, and that's like 80%. And then maybe 15%, actually, we'll call it 19% on, nutrition. And
Mhm.
then, hey, hi, me, I'm the 1% left behind on the mental game. I'm the last person
Yeah.
someone calls. Maybe give me some insights and some tips on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, with nutrition, as my athletes level up and have more financial support and can afford things that cost a bit more, we move into a full nutrition testing panel with a functional medicine doctor to find out their genetic levels, their allergies, their deficiencies, where they're at, and come up with a plan that's specific to their body. Um, with people who maybe can't do that or aren't willing to pull the trigger on it, then I like to be more towards like a paleo type diet: meat, rice, potatoes, fruits and veggies, nuts and seeds. So more like a caveman style diet. But most of my athletes I work with are at the highest level, and we're digging really deep on these things and testing frequently to know specifically what it is that they want, what it is that they need, and where they're lacking, what supplements they need to be on, what foods they should eat more of. So we go deep on that. And I don't do it all by myself, though. I work with a team of doctors. We've got people at Red Bull that we work with. And then I've got a doctor out in Colorado that I work with, Dr. Corey King, who's been super helpful for my athletes. And I really appreciate that guy because not only does he help them, but he also teaches me a lot. Um, as far as what's the difference between the night before the race and race day, before the race, I don't like to change much. I like to eat how we're eating through the whole week, and make sure that you're fully nourished with a diverse nutrient profile that would look something like um, potatoes, meat, and a vegetable. As far as race day goes, you've got a lot of different mindsets and sensitivities on race day of what makes people feel good and what doesn't. So we really have to dive into that athlete and figure out what it is that's going to make them feel good mentally and physically, and also actually nourish them for the demand that's going to be put on them. So I don't have a set race day plan because it really depends on the athlete and what they absorb well and what they don't. But it's much more regular than most would think. A lot of people think like we have all these foods on race day that we need to be eating. We really need a breakfast, a meal in the middle of the day, and a dinner. And then we need to be replacing what you're burning off during the motos, and then adding in supplements and specific electrolytes and stuff like that to replenish what you lose in your sweat.
Yeah. Now, how do you prevent any of these glucose spikes and things such as that?
Uh, Normally, you're going to need to have a lot of healthy fats throughout the day, which you get nuts, seeds, avocados, coconut oil, grass fed butter, things like that. You actually want some high insulin or a high glucose fuel right when you get off of the bike. So, something like a Rhino Power or Hammer Heat or Arma, every major company has one where right when you get off, you're pounding down those carbohydrates that you just burned off. Because when your heart rate's super high, like you are when you're on the track, you're not really burning any fat. It's just straight glycogen. So we do a really, really high dose of sugar or glycogen right when they get off the bike. But then all the normal meals that they're eating through the day should be balanced.
Interesting. I was not aware of that. That's really interesting. So are you doing that to prevent them from crashing then?
Think about it like a gas tank in your car. So you got a full gas tank of glycogen before you go out on the track, and your heart rate's at 190 the whole time you're out there. And your glycogen stores, they're in your muscles, are getting depleted as the minutes go on. And the more minutes you go, the more you got to replenish. So right when you pull off the track, fill that store back up with the amount of grams needed based off of how long you just trained for. Also, how much you weigh, your heart rate, all these things play a factor. So it is specific to the rider. But if I'm talking generalities, we're replacing like 20 to 40 grams of glucose every time they come off the track.
Oh, wow. And what kind of form is that in typically?
I like to use a form of like rice or corn. So like a Rhino Power carbo fuel or hydration fuel. I've been working with the guys at Rhino Power for a long time. Their products tend to do really well. Some people have a little bit more sensitive stomachs, and we may move to a different type of carb, like a maltodextrin or a dextrose. But I tend to use glucose for most people. And then also we can have some fruit or things like that. But when you look at a supercross day, you've got some really quick turnaround times until you get a longer break. So we tend to do like liquid, really quick digesting gels or drinks during the day. And then we have that longer break, then get a real meal in.
What are your thoughts on like the Scratch, Liquid IV, those type of tools to kind of stay hydrated?
All those are going to fall into the category of what I was just speaking of. So I like to do, there's a couple of things you have to work on where you're working with a high level athlete. One is what they can digest well. Two, what their actual demand is. And three, who the heck are they sponsored by? Right. So most of the time, the goal is to use the sponsored product. So I like to look at what, levels of product that company has and pick and choose the right ones and do some testing with it. And hopefully that product works well for them. If not, we're going to find something that works.
Yeah, you can always, take
Post
out the
a picture.
container and do a little dumpy dump and do a little refill. And
Yeah.
But nobody does that, I'm sure. Certainly not with the Monster Energy cans or the Red Bull cans right after an event. So one thing that I wanted to kind of hear if you've had any interesting anecdotes on this, when you talked about the functional medicine doc, the few people, I'm surprised not more people have done it. And matter of fact, it's on my list of things to do. I actually just found out I had an almond allergy like 2 months ago. So here I am living on this planet for more than 20 years and found that out recently. And I'm like, all of a sudden I was keeled over and I was like, I am dying. I'm like, what is this? But it's just interesting. I said to myself, that was like the wake up call for me. I'm like, wow, how am I just knowing this now? And if I'm knowing that almonds are an issue, what else is an issue? And so what I'm curious to hear from you is any anecdotes of any real shocking revelations from this panel of testing where you can find either your allergies or foods that you don't digest well? Have you heard anything interesting that was surprising to you and your athletes?
The most surprising thing to me is that everyone's different. So, you really can't just say X food is bad for all moto athletes or X food is good for all moto athletes. So we do have some generalities that if you're not going to go that deep in your testing, will push you towards. But really, when you do these testing, you find out based off the person's genetic history, based off their medical history, how many antibiotics they've been on, how much surgeries they've been on, what amount of stress have they been under, have they ever had mono or EpsteinBarr or something like that? All these things play a factor in how well they absorb nutrients and what foods affect them positively and negatively. So that's why I like to go the full deep dive and figure out all of it so that we know we've left no stone unturned, because the demand of the travel schedule, the training schedule, the mental load, the stress that these guys are under, it all takes a toll if you don't have good nutrition.
Oh, for sure. And it's interesting because when you had mentioned Epstein-Barr, I've been surprised to hear, it seems, at least my perspective and perception Whether it's true or not, I'm not sure. But my belief is, and you can tell me otherwise, that Epstein-Barr and overtraining seems to be an issue for sure in supercross and motocross. Not so sure if it is in other sports, but so one, do you agree or disagree on the overtraining, and also if Epstein-Barr is closely linked to that? And then secondly, even if you do or do not, what are the signs of overtraining? Because it's a very real thing. I mean, we have overthinking in my field, which is, runs rampant, but it's hard sometimes. You say, well, what am I supposed to just not think about this? And so it's like, what's the line between thinking and overthinking? What's the line between training and overtraining?
Yeah. You said, what are some things you can look at to know if you're overtraining or not? And the first one is going to be how well you're recovering. But the question is, from an analytics standpoint, how do you actually know if you're recovering or not just by saying I'm tired or not in the morning? And things that we look at are resting heart rate variability, how well the athlete's heart rate is coming down during exercise, how long they can hold their threshold or their where they tested at originally for. So we know if someone is overtraining or not. A lot of times you'll see athletes nowadays who are using Oura rings or Whoop bands, or Polar has recovery tracking on their watches. So does Garmin. So we're using tools to make sure that it's not a guess. So if I see an athlete whose normal resting heart rate is 42, and after a race weekend, it's Monday, they had a long travel schedule, and they're up at 48, that's a big difference between 42 and 48. And we're going to pull back and go lighter that day. It's not a max out day. It's not a day where we're pounding motos all day. Where if your normal resting heart rate's 42 and you wake up on Tuesday morning, we're back at 42 or 41 or 43, we know that it's go time. So we're using tools to see and measure things. And as technology has developed, this has become so much better from someone who's working remote with athletes, because I can see all the data without asking. I just get it every morning. So do I think it's important? Very important. Do I think that Epstein-Barr and these type of sicknesses are common in moto? Yes. I'm not a medical doctor, but I have experienced a lot of it over my 15 years being in the industry.
Yeah. And I mean, why do you think that is? I mean, and I don't know if it's an accurate statement to say that it seems to be more of an issue in our sport. I mean, we've seen it with Dean Wilson. We've seen it with a lot of guys. I think maybe even Ken Roxon. I just feel like the amount of training and just never lifting and never stopping and just this unrelentless fight. There's a part of me that feels that we are making a big mistake, in that, maybe we'd perform better if we just backed it down. And maybe it's only 10%, but that 10%, just like you said, resting heart rate goes from 42 to 48. All right, sure, it's only 6 points, but only 6 points is not only 6 points. Yeah. And I would argue that maybe even 5% to single digit percentages, up to 5 to maybe 9%, who knows, maybe just that much of a bringing it down on the training could make a difference. I mean, do you think, what do you think prevents people from recognizing the signs of overtraining and maybe having a little bit more balance in their life?
Yeah. The want to succeed and always work harder to get better makes you feel like going easier, you're not going to get where you want to be. But sometimes that is the right thing to do. So I think when you get a good team around you who helps you monitor and take the emotions out of it, it can really be helpful. And I think that the industry has progressed so much through the years with tracking these type of things and learning when it's going to come on and how to prevent it. But when you look at the travel schedule combined with the workload, combined with the past surgeries and antibiotics and lack of good gut biome or immune system, all those things play a factor in an athlete tanking and getting sick maybe easier than what you would think.
Yeah, and it's funny you talk about the microbiome. There's a gentleman who grew up with my father, who actually lives down the street, not even a mile from where I am now. And His name's Ralph. And good old Ralph is 75, whatever he is. And Ralph will zip by you. If you're going to get your mail, whoa, right by on his bicycle, not motorcycle, not car, bicycle. And then you'll see, and then what you'll do is you'll go about your day. You'll check your emails. You'll order your online pizza. It will be delivered in 30 minutes or less, as promised. Thank you, Domino's. And then 2 hours pass. And then for some reason, you're outside watering your flowers and doing what you do. And here goes Ralph again, 2 hours later. Boom. And then, so one time, I'm like, you know what? I saw it happen a couple times, and I'm like, I'm done with this. I'm like, Ralph ain't getting by me next time. So I actually stopped Ralph, and I said, Ralph, I got to ask you, how are you doing this? And it was funny. We talked for almost an hour and a half, and he spoke the whole time about just that, the gut microbiome. And he's big on kefir.
Kefir.
Yeah. He's big on it.
Fermented yogurt. It's fermented milk, essentially. So full of probiotics.
Yeah. And what was wild is he brought me some, said, go buy some milk tomorrow morning and I'll stop by. He brought it, and I kept it going for a while. And I don't know. I honestly, that was right around the time where I was in the best fitness. After that, I was in the best physical condition I've been in possibly ever my entire life. And then now I've moved to kimchi and sauerkraut, which also has some fermentation, which, by the way, if you've never tried kimchi, that stuff is good.
I'm a fan.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I mean, really good stuff. So how does that all work? Like, and depending on the foods that we eat, because, like, for example, I talked to Alden Baker one time, and he's very like anti-red meat, and he talks about the hormones within there, and then there's some people that are plant-based. What's the interaction there? Like, what are we really looking at when we talk about the microbiome? Like, maybe give me not just a general idea of what are we trying to achieve here with these probiotics?
Yeah, your gut biome, or your stomach, and everything that's in there is the first step of your immune system. So on a schedule, if you're looking at an athlete like a pro golfer or a moto or supercross or snowcross, who's always traveling on planes, in airports, nights where you have low sleep, other nights where you have high sleep, that all is going to affect your immune system. And the gut is the beginning of the immune system. So what we look at first with athletes is making sure that they have a healthy gut. And got surgery a year ago, had my ACL redone. When I got done, had to go on antibiotics. Those antibiotics killed off all that bacteria in my stomach. So now that athlete is going to need to rebuild that bacteria. And there are some general things you can do just by taking a multi-strain probiotic and eating kimchi and fermented foods. But also we can test for things like that to see exactly what it is that the athlete needs. So I'm a huge proponent of finding out what is going on in your physiology to figure out what it is that you need to do to get to the next step.
So you can actually measure whether someone's got streptococcus pneumoniae, or you can actually measure that in the gut biome. Are you saying that that's the level of detail that you guys sometimes will explore?
We'll find out where they're deficient and anything that is a red flag. And then with a team of doctors, implement supplements and products to help them get back to a state of balance or homeostasis so that they can perform their best. And a lot of times that starts with the gut, and it's going to be two parts. One is going to be removing the things that are messing it up, and two is going to be adding things in to rebuild it. So most of the time that comes with some sort of elimination diet, and things that people don't want to hear, but is super common, is eliminating gluten, dairy, and sugar, at least in a short term, to help all that bacteria get back to balance, and then adding in supplements based off of the person. And then once they get back to a state of balance, people can tolerate things differently. So I don't have a one way to do it. I like to work with the individual and with a team of doctors to figure it out exactly.
Yeah, I love that. And it brings me to the thought of, I recently test drove the carnivore diet. I personally loved it. I thought it was great. I felt very much, I'm a Joe Rogan fan. And, he's a big fan of the carnivore diet. I also love meat too. It's my favorite thing to eat, especially red meat. Really enjoyed it. Felt the strongest I've ever been, and actually ended up having my meat matching my personal best on flat bench. And now I think I can exceed it.
Mhm.
And I give some credit to it. How do you view carnivore versus plant-based diets? I mean, can an athlete truly succeed? I mean, we see someone like Lewis Hamilton in F1 has had a great career, maybe not as aggressive. What they're doing is maybe motocross, supercross, but probably not that far off, because I mean, the amount of G's they're experiencing, who knows how much calories they're burning. Maybe it
Mhm.
is very similar to supercross, motocross. He's plant-based and other athletes are as well. And maybe it's trending lately. How do you see the differences between an athlete who's plant-based and carnivore?
Obviously, if you're plant based, there's things that you're not going to be getting from your food, so you'll need to supplement them. Um, we saw Dylan Ferrandis win an outdoor championship and actually smoke everybody and come on strong late in every moto. He's plant based. Um, we got Eli Tomac and Ricky Carmichael, who've dominated the sport for a long time, and they eat meat. So I really think it comes back to the person and if you're doing it correctly for your body or not. Personally, not a big fan of a plant based diet. I think that a rotational diet of different types of proteins, from game meat to red meat to fish, shellfish, and then a nutrient dense vegetable profile is really important. So for me, it's not really. I'm not on plant based train, but if an athlete presented to me a situation where it made sense to go that way, I 100% would.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I can see it, and it's just interesting. You start to realize that it always comes down to the same thing, which it really has to be customized. And I think a lot of it's your beliefs too. If
Hmm.
you believe that red meat harms you, then I believe in the placebo or the nocebo effect. I see it happen all the time.
Yep.
It's amazing the power of the mind. I mean, I remember one time I was doing a movement. It was actually flat bench again, and by mistake, I was going for a certain weight that I knew I should be able to do a certain amount of times. So I had this expectation. I said, all right, I should be able to do this, whatever it was, 6 times. Had put on mistakenly an extra 10 pounds. And sure enough, I did the exact amount of reps, the
Yeah.
exact way that I would have thought. And I'll tell you, I remember how mad I was. I usually don't get too aggressive with myself. I don't get too mad, but I was mad for a very long time. And I think I let myself stay mad because I think anger is interesting. And, I think it gets a bad rap because the truth is anger is just built up emotion. And
Hmm.
so anger and the emotion that is built as a result of the energy that's built as a result of it isn't so much the problem as to where do you expel or send that, what's the next decision you make with it. And for me, it was like, okay, that is not happening again. And it's funny because ever since, I tend to, even the gym I go to now that I'm going to go to after this, I think the average age is like 22. And it's funny because I don't see anyone push to failure. And then here I am a couple years older, and I'm like, I feel like I'm pushing to failure, and I'm like the only guy. And
Hmm.
I don't get it, but it's all because of this one incident that happened probably 20 years ago, no joke, that long ago. It stuck with me because it burned such a hole in my brain that
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm never doing that again. So it's interesting that you could see that anger can be used for good. In this case, it's had a positive impact on my workouts ever since. And
Hmm.
some people go the opposite way with
Yeah.
anger, and it doesn't
I
serve
had an awesome example of that at the Houston Supercross. One of my racers, Jace Owen, worked with him for a long time. And Jace is one of those riders that when he's pissed, he absolutely rides his ass off. And he went down in the first corner. And I've never seen that kid hit a set of whoops so fast. And came back up, made it right into the main through the heat race, even though he was laying in the corner dead last. Came off the track. And I'm like, dude, what just happened to you in the whoops? You haven't went that. You went twice as fast as you did all day through the whoops. And he just, that anger, unlocked a part of his brain that he wasn't willing to unlock without it.
That is wild. Yeah, and it's interesting because some people, I think that and this is an area I'm currently exploring, is trying to better distinguish this with my athletes. One word that I do not like to hear is frustrated, because frustration very rarely has something positive come from it. But when someone's angry, you do sometimes see that. And I think a lot of times it's, whenever you're emotional, I always say, is it a challenge or is it a threat? Because if you view something as a threat, then you start to go down that cascade of sympathetic nervous system, fight, flight, or
Fight or
freeze.
flight. Yeah.
But if you look at something as a challenge, because, if you have an obstacle, I mean, it's your choice how you look at it. But when you look at it as a challenge, like my golfer, we actually have challenge holes. He plays golf to the best that he can, but we always have 2 challenge holes for every 18. And you know what? We've studied it and looked at it. Sure as hell, always seems to do better on the challenge holes. So, but then it's interesting. So it's like, all right, what do we do? Add 2 more. Then you get 4 challenge holes, that diminishes the effect. But it was very telling, because it's like, wow, you do well when you're challenged, but then you start to realize it's all about keeping that frame towards that challenge and avoiding the threat and the cascade of events that happens after that.
Yeah. Very interesting. It's, what can you do with it? How do you channel it? Where does your mind go when you get to that point? And what's the effect of it? And you can see people who ride horrible when they're pissed off and they just make a ton of mistakes, or other people that just let their brain go and the talent comes out. So it'd be cool to have, and maybe you do, to have a formula for this.
Yes, for me, I'm big on challenge versus threat, uncertainty, uncomfortability, the unknown. Fear of the unknown, believe it or not, is interesting. It's not talked about enough. If you say, oh, I have a fear of failure, well, that also feeds into the fear of the unknown. Your fear of failure is not being sure whether or not you are going to fail or not. And also fear of public speaking. It's really the fear of the unknown, because you have the fear of the speaking, but you just don't know how you're going to do. And a lot of athletes, that's why you see athletes that have these pre-race rituals or routines, it is at a time when they're so uncertain and so uncomfortable with that uncertainty. It's the one thing that is certain. And it's amazing when you start to just think of the word certainty, and you start to realize that it all goes back to when we were Neanderthals, where, I don't know if I'm going to be alive tomorrow. Average life expectancy is 30. I'm 28, which is like let's say I'm a Neanderthal. I'm not 28, but let's say I was 28. It's like, wow, that's like ancient. Like you're like a noble, who knows, whatever they called them back then, or maybe you're like a whatever that means. They probably, had some sort of title for it. But what was interesting is just, it's still inside of us. Technology's evolved, but like the brain doesn't just all of a sudden keep pace with where we're at. We've advanced as a society faster than some of the deeper, like lizard brain, like, because that part of the brain is more like in the interior side. Sure, the frontal cortex has grown. That has happened. So our cognitive ability, our abilities to like imagine and things like that, look into the future. But it's funny because you see it all the time that people are still afflicted with this uncertainty, the unknown, because you don't know what's going to happen. Back in the day, you went to go get a couple berries for your tribe, and a T-Rex, it's like, whoa, this is over. I'm done. I mean, so you realize that fear and the unknown and the uncertain was something important, because it had to exist to keep you alive, right?
Yeah. And I've seen some of my athletes that work with you, their pre-race rituals develop, and I call it being connected to source. They're just connected to it. It's what they do. It comes to them. They've done it so many times that it gets them into a place that's where they need to be. And at first, it's kind of something they have to think about. But then once they get going on it, they're just in the zone once they get done with it.
Oh, it's true. Yeah. And it's interesting with the zone, there's a whole bunch of check marks that tend to need to be checked. And, one of them is you need to be challenged. One of them is you need to have a certain level of excitement. And, that's another interesting one too, is people don't realize that when you say that you're nervous, there's a cascade of events going on within your body that are not all that different than if you're excited. And
Hmm.
so really it's the frame, right? Think about like my favorite example is like a roller coaster. If you're kind of on the edge on roller coasters, you're going up and it's like tick, tick, tick. Oh my God. Oh my God. You're totally fearful. You're sweaty, pupils dilated, heart rate elevated. But then all of a sudden, boom, you go down and it's like the frame changes and they're like, this is awesome. It's like,
Yeah.
well, wait, you were just about ready to bail and wave off the thing and see if you get the operator to hit the stop button. And now all of a sudden you're up like, this is the best thing I've ever done. So it's amazing. You can see the shift in
Yep.
how people feel, and you realize how fleeting feelings can actually be. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. That part of your program has helped me as a trainer for sure.
Oh, it's so much fun. Yeah, it's fun. The mental game is great. So let me ask you this last question. Obviously, your future is bright, and I can only imagine where you're going to be in just. I was going to say 5 years, and I'm like 5 years. That's like an eternity. Drew's probably thinking like 6 months. Um, what Where do you see yourself in the next, in your business in the next year or two, and also, what version of yourself, how do you need to change and grow in order to achieve that result?
Uh, for me, where I see myself is continuing to develop, uh, I call them ancillary revenue streams. So, other ways that I can bring in revenue that help people. And also, along the way, I really love creating jobs for people to help provide for them and teach them and kind of show them the way of how I've done it. So, I see myself in the next 6 months. In the last 6 months, I've started a physical therapy practice. I've grown the actual gym business here. Moving forward, I'm looking at getting into the online space and having programs to help people in the motorsports industry. Also, people who want to transform their mindset and their bodies. And then moving forward after that, I'd love to have, like we talked about, it might have been off air at the very beginning, but moving into more locations of momentum. So, Momentum Tally, Momentum Tampa, Momentum Phoenix, Momentum Chicago. I just like to say that and put a lot out there, because for me, when I put it out there and I keep on the daily grind of everything and keep my focus, it tends to blossom. So I'm really excited about the future in my business, the fitness business. And also, I'm looking at really leveling up the level of athletes that I'm working with and watching my athletes grow, continuing to push them and work with a small amount of high level athletes for the years to come.
I love it. Great answer. Yeah. And I mean, it's exciting to know that there's so many opportunities there. It's just whether you're going to take them or not, whether you're going to, like you said, put it out there. And you have to have some degree of blind faith and courage to be like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And,
Yeah.
but I think what's interesting is, you've proven to yourself that if you say you're going to do something, you do it. So I think when you say something, there's something inside of you that says, well, hey, you said it. And I mean, hey, we've got it. Hey, it's recorded. I'm not editing that
Yeah.
piece out, and you don't want me
Yeah.
to, but I'll bet you anything. Here we are. What's it? March 1st, I think, or 2nd,
First.
1st. So we'll see where you're at in 6 months. This will be a nice little thing that you can look back on and be like, wow, how much have I grown and changed in 6 months? And based on what you've been doing, I wouldn't be surprised if you even surprise yourself. So, how can people reach out to you? How can people find you? And I did not ask this yet. To add to it, can people come and train with you that don't race, at the highest level? Is there also a gym facility? I'm assuming that that's a big part of your business. Maybe, let us know about that as well.
Yeah. One, you can always find me. My main platform is Instagram right now, DW Performance, Drew Whitehead. You can reach out to me anytime. Give me a follow, shoot me a message, ask me a question. Love to communicate with people there. If you're in Tallahassee, I have a facility, Momentum Fitness. We're 25,000 square feet. I've got a team of 25 trainers who can help you reach your goals, whether it be athletic goals, weight loss, strength. We've got pro bodybuilders. I've got Pilates and yoga. I've got a lot of ways that we can help transform people if you're actually in Tallahassee. So love to have in the facility. I do have a team of trainers that work with clients online as well. So if you're looking at getting involved in a program and you're an amateur, you're a weekend warrior, we do that also. So you can get in contact with me and I will send you a racer questionnaire, and then we'll find out where it is you want to get to. And from there, figure out if our program is a good program for you or not.
I love it. And, I can validate that Drew is the real deal. I mean, how you do things, I was actually really excited to get you on the podcast and interview you, because I respect you tremendously and what you've done with your athletes. I mean, your program's second to none. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and we'll talk to you soon, Drew.
I appreciate it. Have a good one.